There are moments in the market when price action starts telling a story that most people completely miss, not because the information is hidden, but because the signal is buried under noise, headlines, and emotion. And right now, something extremely unusual is happening in the silver market. The price keeps approaching the same level again and again, around $85, but every time it gets close, something pushes it back. At the same time, the liquidity on the COMEX, one of the largest precious metals trading hubs in the world, has reportedly dropped dramatically. And when liquidity disappears while a price ceiling appears, markets start behaving in ways that very few people understand. This is why the conversation around silver right now is becoming so important. The phrase "silver is being capped" is showing up everywhere. The idea of an $85 trap is spreading through financial circles. And reports that COMEX liquidity may be down as much as 60% have raised serious questions about how this market is functioning beneath the surface. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, it's important to understand something fundamental about markets. Markets are not simple. They are ecosystems. They are networks of institutions, traders, supply chains, industrial demand, investor psychology, and global currency flows. When you see a price hovering under a specific level for a long period of time, it doesn't automatically mean manipulation or conspiracy. Sometimes it simply means the market is going through a phase of intense negotiation between buyers and sellers. But when liquidity begins to shrink while the price repeatedly tests the same level, that is when the story becomes much more interesting. Because liquidity is the lifeblood of any market. Liquidity is what allows buyers and sellers to transact smoothly. It is what allows large orders to be absorbed without extreme price movement. And when liquidity drops significantly, even small changes in demand can create outsized moves. Imagine a large lake filled with water. If someone throws a stone into the lake, the ripple is small because the water absorbs it easily. But imagine that same lake suddenly shrinking into a small pond. Now, when the stone hits the water, the ripple becomes a wave. That is what happens when liquidity disappears. And according to various market observations, liquidity in certain segments of the silver futures market has been tightening. This does not automatically predict any specific outcome, but it does change the dynamics of how the market behaves. Because thin markets are sensitive markets. At the same time, the idea of the $85 trap has captured the attention of many observers. This concept revolves around the psychological behavior of traders when a market approaches a widely watched price level. Round numbers in financial markets are not just numbers. They are psychological magnets. People place orders around them. Algorithms monitor them. Traders watch them. News headlines reference them. And the more attention a level receives, the more dramatic the reactions can become when price approaches it. So imagine a market repeatedly climbing toward $85, but never quite breaking through. Each time it gets close, traders begin to anticipate a breakout. Some position themselves early, others wait for confirmation, and still others prepare to fade the move, betting that the level will hold. Over time, that single number becomes a battlefield. But here is where things get even more fascinating. When a market repeatedly approaches a resistance level without breaking it, two very different interpretations can form. One group sees weakness. They believe the market is failing to push higher and will eventually fall back. Another group sees pressure building. They believe the repeated tests are exhausting the sellers who are defending that level. Both groups are watching the same chart. Both groups are analyzing the same data, yet their conclusions are completely different. That is the nature of markets. They are mirrors reflecting the psychology of everyone involved. And this is where the conversation about silver becomes less about price and more about understanding how markets operate during periods of tension. Because tension is the stage before movement. Think about a compressed spring. The longer it stays compressed, the more energy builds inside it. But you cannot know exactly when it will release. Markets behave in similar ways. Periods of tight ranges, declining liquidity, and repeated resistance tests often represent moments when energy is building beneath the surface. The visible chart may appear calm, but the underlying forces are shifting. This is why experienced market observers often focus less on predicting exact price outcomes and more on studying the structure of the market itself. Structure tells a deeper story. For example, when liquidity drops significantly, it can signal that some participants are stepping back from the market. Large institutions sometimes reduce activity during periods of uncertainty. Market makers may widen spreads. Traders may lower position sizes. All of these actions reduce the amount of available liquidity. And when liquidity becomes scarce, price discovery becomes more fragile. This doesn't automatically mean prices must rise or fall, but it does mean that when a move finally happens, it can travel further and faster than many expect. Another important lesson from situations like this involves the concept of crowd psychology. Most people enter markets looking for certainty. They want clear signals, obvious trends, and guaranteed outcomes. But the most educational moments in financial markets occur when things are unclear. When a price hovers under a level like $85 for weeks or months, frustration begins to build among traders. Some get impatient, some lose confidence, some abandon their analysis entirely. And yet these are often the moments when the market is quietly revealing its most valuable lessons, because patience is one of the rarest skills in finance. The ability to observe without reacting emotionally is what separates disciplined market students from impulsive participants. Silver, like many commodities, has always been a fascinating teacher in this regard. It sits at the intersection of industrial demand, monetary history, and investor psychology. On one side, silver is used in technology, electronics, and manufacturing. On the other side, it carries a legacy as a store of value and a monetary metal. This dual identity creates a market that can sometimes behave very differently from traditional assets. When industrial demand shifts, silver reacts. When currency concerns rise, silver reacts. When investor sentiment swings, silver reacts. And when liquidity changes while price is testing a major level, the entire dynamic can become even more complex. This is why understanding markets is less about predicting and more about observing patterns over time. For viewers watching these developments, one of the most valuable habits is learning how to analyze the environment rather than focusing only on price targets. Look at liquidity trends. Observe how markets behave around key psychological levels. Notice whether volatility is expanding or contracting. Pay attention to how narratives form around certain numbers or events. These observational skills build something much more powerful than a single prediction. They build financial awareness, and financial awareness is a long-term advantage because markets will always change. New headlines will appear, new trends will emerge, but the underlying forces of psychology, liquidity, and supply-demand interaction remain constant. The conversation around silver and the so-called $85 trap is really a conversation about those deeper forces. It is a reminder that markets often move in phases: accumulation phases, consolidation phases, expansion phases, and sometimes confusion phases. Each phase teaches something different. During accumulation, the lesson is patience. During expansion, the lesson is discipline. During consolidation, the lesson is observation. And during confusion, the lesson is emotional control. The current silver discussion appears to contain elements of consolidation and tension at the same time, a price level that keeps attracting attention, liquidity conditions that are shifting, participants debating whether the market is being capped or simply preparing for its next chapter. The truth is that markets rarely reveal their full intentions in advance, but they do leave clues, and those clues reward the people who take time to study them calmly rather than reacting impulsively. This is why conversations like this matter. Not because they promise a specific outcome, but because they encourage viewers to think deeper about how markets operate, to look beyond the headlines, to understand the mechanics beneath the price chart, and to develop the mindset of a long-term observer rather than a short-term reactor. Because the greatest wealth skill is not predicting the next price move. It is developing the patience, awareness, and discipline to navigate uncertainty. Silver's current situation is simply another chapter in that ongoing story. Whether the $85 level eventually breaks, holds, or evolves into something completely different, the real value lies in understanding the process, watching how liquidity influences volatility, watching how psychological levels shape behavior, watching how narratives form around specific price points. Every market cycle becomes a classroom for those willing to observe it carefully. And if there is one message to take from the idea that silver may be facing an $85 trap while liquidity declines, it is this: markets are always communicating. Not through words, but through structure, through behavior, through patterns of pressure and release. The more we learn to read those signals calmly, the more prepared we become for whatever comes next. If you found this perspective valuable, consider supporting the channel by liking the video, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing for more deep discussions about markets, psychology, and financial awareness. Because the goal here isn't hype, it's clarity. And in a world full of financial noise, clarity might be the most valuable asset of all.